we have quorum. And so we can call the regular meeting to order. We have everybody up on the screen.
Everybody that's talking in.
Wow. This is a light one. Public comment, non-agenda items. We'll start with this young lady, please. Please talk into the hockey puck there and we'll get this going.
Good morning,
Megan.
Meg O'Leary. Thank you for public meeting time. I am the community outreach lead for the Big Sky Governance Study, and I've been here before you. This might be my third time. I think I was here maybe twice in person and once zooming in. And so now I feel like I'm part of the family. I mean, all you guys are commenting on my hair, so I just must be part of the family. A quick update from last time I was here. We've been working on the outreach still, and if any of you went to the January 28th second public meeting, you saw that the executive summary report was presented to the community. And that is scenario number one. A lot of people are asking, are you going to have a scenario that studies status quo? And when we met here in September with all the different entities that run this community, we got all their fiscal analysis, we got all their back of the house stuff, and all that information went into an executive summary. And that's live and on the website, and it's a couple hundred pages, and it'll be really great reading. So please take a look at that. We also, at that Jan 28th meeting, presented the survey. We're in the part of the study where we're collecting surveys. We want 10% of the population. That means 350 responses. Last Thursday, we were at 116. I texted you, I texted your wife. I just gave him the QR code. If I have your email, you're going to hear from me. I also have the QR code here, but I really, it's great to get feedback from all the people that, like us, that are running the place, but I'm trying to get to everybody so that you then take it and then give it to 5 of your network, so that it's not just this one voice that we're always hearing from. Please take the survey. The next public meeting will be one step back. The reason the survey is really important is the scope of this project really gives the community 3 different scenarios that will then be studied. Every stone will be uncovered in each of those 3 scenarios. So those scenarios are what the community values. So your answers are going to guide the 3 scenarios. We have 1 scenario, so status quo. You're going to get 3 additional scenarios. One might be create a county. One might be incorporate. One might be annex into one of them. We don't know. The survey is going to help guide it. Okay, that's why this thing is super important. Then the scenario work starts to happen. The 3rd public meeting will be sometime late March, mid-April. Stay tuned.
Do you mind passing that around?
Yes, please.
Any questions for Meg?
You leave us a copy, we can put it on the.
Yeah.
Meg, what do you think is the most important topic? What's the one you hear out there with any other than the post office?
Representation.
Representation. People want to be heard.
We don't have a voice. Took us 7 years to get 3 speed bumps on Little Coyote. We can't get our roads fixed. When we got our blinking lights, we can't get anybody to return the call. So that then starts to get into this weird area of state and federal. But if a lot of people are saying, yeah, we get that, but if we're a unified voice, then we're at least going to have some sway with those different entities. The other one is our money going there and our money going there. I mean, that's just huge. And Dick knows this more than anybody. In fact, I have your big box of stuff from 06 to 09.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming again, Mike.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. All right. So any public comment? See a couple of additions up there online,
Yeah, we got Mason.
but nothing for public comment. Okay, how about phones off, just as a reminder? Conflict of interest declarations? Round the horn?
None.
Okay. Then we'll officially call the regular meeting to order. Get into the consent agenda. How about,
Oh yeah, the crash.
what do we got?
As Jim.
Always like to know who. Hi, Mike. Okay, consent agenda. Always open the floor up for Terry, because you're bundled in there.
Yeah,
What do you have? I mean, let's just make sure we take advantage of
well, I wrote up the write-off of the new plants included in this report. There'll be some additional engineering costs that will be written off from the old plant that you'll see on the next financials, but we're on budget based on our original budget where we were. So there's no surprises for to give to the board on where we're at today.
And I just asked earlier, Adam, just thoughts. We get a better idea what the O and M is going to be on the new plant, the impact, tracking maybe what was budgeted a few years ago versus actual as we get into the first quarter.
Yeah, we're trying to get an understanding of what it's costing to maintain this new equipment down there. Yeah,
How's it feel?
it's a lot more than it was.
Okay, so we'll let that go. So that's the consent agenda. Any questions for Terry?
We had a big discrepancy in net income. On there, is there anything we should be worried about?
No, we're on budget. What was added to the expenses were the write-offs of the old plant. And that put the net income far more negative than we were budgeted originally, but based on the actual numbers, we're in line with the budget that we presented to the board last year.
Okay. Anything else, Terry? Like to entertain a motion then? For the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
Okay, second by Al. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Good to committee reports. I would say a couple things on the committee reports. Still a firm believer in the committees, but there's so many different moving parts right now that we're relying on our consultants, Scott, of course, and Mace, on some of these topics that used to be just updates from the committee. And now that information is important, whether it's water and sewer district, the summer, Canyon Water and Sewer District, the meeting with Guy, with disposal specific to the Canyon with Mace. So it's not really as much a committee report. We might restructure some of that, because the concern I have is someone joins the meeting and they say, great, I want to hear what the committee update is. We kind of gloss over it and then we get into the meat and potatoes of it a little later in the agenda and they go, boy, I wish I stayed on. So we might fine tune that. And some of those items that we're going to work on, we'll hit them later with Mace. The disposal is just a major topic now, and we're kind of been sidebarring that. I think all of us knew it was coming. We'll kind of get them on that. And we'll hit them one by one, but gonna dial in maybe a little more focus on the reports as after that last meeting that we had, that meeting with Guy and so on, just to understand where we're gonna go forward. So that being said, if it's all right with everybody, we'll blend the Gallatin Canyon Water and Sewer District into the Mace report. Rather than talk about committee report, he'll give them much more thorough, probably an accurate update than a subcommittee would give at this point. We can get into compliance committee.
Sure.
Okay.
We got the news a couple weeks ago that Kate is moving on from A to S. And so I think we need to circle up with Scott and kind of figure out what that implications are for the ongoing studies and where we're at with compliance. And hitting that up and on our agenda here to do in the next couple of days. I think that's about where we're at.
Okay. Questions, points?
Josh, I can't remember his last name, French is taking over these duties for Kate. He's been incorporated in the emails and actually is pretty on top of it, because we're working with Boyne for another pilot up at one of their hotels. And everything, as far as I know, is still going pretty good over here at Riverviews.
Okay. All right. Takes us through compliance. Budget CIP, like you want to talk maybe a little about that at a pretty productive meeting, more about setting the table on it than moving forward, but it was a really productive subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, organized, meeting, was like this last week, just talking about, priority projects, generation like one, which is a brand new project, or two, which is like maintaining the existing facilities, and what does that look like, and what sort of, capital improvement plans do we need to put into place for, things like the membranes. There's all kinds of different components to the plant that we have to be thinking about over the next, 5 or 10 years, and trying to fit that in the bucket, have the existing ratepayers, help fund and create a path forward to make sure everything's up to date, current, and in good working order. Then second generation or first generation, like Canyon District and other larger projects, booster station, whatever else that may be something we look at down the road, different funding mechanisms and different priorities. So a lot of work went into that. Set the groundwork now, it's identifying those projects, timelines, and when we begin to talk about how they fit into the budgets.
Yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener. Al, you get a basketball game either?
No, it's interesting.
Okay, I was just thinking there was one I missed you on the candy.
So,
No, the one I missed you on, I think the candy was, didn't. Okay. Al didn't make a candy, I want to be clear, it wasn't just me. Al, thoughts on that?
well, I think we're having a lot of conversations about the cost of the excess capacity. And really, I think as a board, maybe having to have a different perspective on that moving forward. And so we're still in the discussion stages of that, but it's expensive to have capacity available for users that aren't connected yet. And as our plan has grown, as we've expanded this plan, as we start talking about phase two, that cost of the excess capacity gets greater and greater. So that's something we're taking a hard look at.
It's gonna be a top priority probably moving forward, especially as we even look at phase two. Anything else that, Matt? Yeah, I think what came out of it was, one of the top things for me at least was that centrifuge discussion and the idea of where we start and where we finish some of these priorities, and talk about an internal application with the different departments, whether it's Peter or Adam or so on, and go through kind of an application that says, this is why it's a top priority for me. This is why it's a need, not a want. Attach some level of ROI to it, and then track that budget. In other words, when you come in with an application and you say it's going to be $1 million, and by the time we approve it and review it and pull the trigger on execution, it's 3 million. We need to talk about why and learn from that moving forward. We've got a couple of projects that had a similar scenario to that. So, or a project. So the key is we got to start moving forward on some of these priorities, the needs more than anything, especially given the fact that there can be an ROI to them. That was what I got out of it as well. Johnny, anything that you should have seen things differently? You definitely, Al, it's a great point on the reserved inventory for the SRD.
Yeah,
That is
I like that analogy.
a whole new.
So, from the experience I had, bringing a different perspective to the board and hearing, it's eye opening, or, how we're setting ourselves up for the future and bringing that next level. So we have all the cards on the table and we know what we're looking at and how we are going to move it forward, ties into strategic planning that we're trying to set up so we can have those conversations and give me and my staff more direction and directives on how we're going to do it. I mean, we got a $60 million state-of-the-art facility over there and ton more improvements and changes. So having that CIP identified, I think really will speak volumes to the community and also our partnership with BizRad and how we're going to move things forward with decisions that were made 20, 30 years ago with how we do business up here. So I think it's really important.
I think it's the creation of almost a dashboard that we start tracking the team. It's internal communication between all of us as a board. And again, the subcommittees are great, but they're only great if the communication is shared with the rest of the board so that we're all on the same page. And that's an eye opener on some of the CIP moving forward. You got a lot of a lot of priorities to deal with out there. And then there's the financial modeling, and with Terry's plans for the future, we got to start looking how this model is going to work long term and get a clear picture of it. So it's a great meeting. It was an eye opener. So anything else? Questions on it? Dashboard. Flat Iron Committee, there was some talk right after the last meeting, and it was kind of a reminder today coming in saying, boy, you finish your meeting, we all gather and have some important points discussed after the meeting, then you get the board packet and you go, oh yeah, that's right, we talked about that. Flat Irons are, I think, a good example of that right now. I think we need to come up with a protocol, given all of the annexation agreements that are out there, or applications, I'm going to say, that are out there. I think the protocol, first of all, for you, Johnny, a suggestion would be, you look at it and you say, is it reasonable? And not to approve it, or even to review it from a board perspective, but to say, we will accept that application. Because if we're not going to accept the application, we don't want to engage the legal team on it. We don't want to distract or take away from Susan if she says, no, you can't do this. So the bottom line, if you get an application, I think Flat Iron's a really good example. We at least have to either accept it or reject it. Otherwise, we're stalled. We're into the next meeting. So in Flat Iron in particular, I think we still have Spanish Peaks. My mind is a top priority, of course, just because of the timeline they've been on. Number two, of course, the housing trust. Flat Iron, I don't know where they fit in this. Were they number three?
Number three.
You have Boyne at the table now, number four.
Fire department.
Fire department.
And then an independent.
So it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It just has to follow a protocol. So at this point, we have Spanish Peaks accepted. We have the housing trust accepted. We need to keep these things in the hopper. We can't stall on them, or they're just going to become overwhelming. Flat Iron at this point, then, are you in a position to at least review it, or is it something the board can take action on just to accept the annexation agreement? Because the annexation agreement allows us to make that next decision of flow-based versus SFEs.
Application, not agreement.
Yeah.
Application. If you accept the application, you can start in the agreement that would identify that fork in the road on SFEs for that.
Yes, we have the applications and we have everything we need to accept them, to review them, so they can be accepted. We got the map all clarified, and okay, so we have all the information we need to move forward.
Is there any action we want to take today for Flat Iron to accept it so that we can at least engage Susan? And I'd ask Susan if she's on the call right now to say, can we accept it at this stage, given the agenda?
She's on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, you can go ahead and accept it. And I think after having the last 2 rounds of discussions, I think we're really close to having a final agreement to be able to present to you. So with the ordinance, I think it's fine to proceed.
Okay, so that gives us the opportunity to discuss accepting the application, not the agreement, the application. Does the board want to take action on it at this point, or?
I'll make a motion that we accept the application from Flat Iron.
Second? Any discussion on it? Any confusion? Or
What are we accepting? What is in the application?
They have, there's an application form, a formal application form, as exhibits. It has pretty much what their intent is, the boundaries, acreage, so on. And it would be like accepting an application for a permit. But then, of course, you go through the work of the agreement.
No, what I mean is, let's just summarize what is in that as far as acreage, SFEs, size.
So when they fill out their application, it's pretty much just a legal description of what they're wanting to annex into the district. And is it next to or adjacent to our current border? And those are the two things that we look at is it next to our current district? And do they have all the legal descriptions of what they're actually bringing in?
Does it fit the criteria? And Dick, it's a great point to bring up right now. It's a big difference in an application that comes in if it's from, I'm just going to use a property over by Firelight as an example. If you don't have the SFEs, that could be rejected because we don't have the excess capacity, therefore they don't fit the criteria for annexation. In the case of Spanish Peaks, Flat Iron, Boyne, they have their SFU, so we don't have to address the excess capacity. But maybe what, you have a good point there to say, you should probably identify these and have a recommendation to reject it if it doesn't fit the criteria or accept it based on the criteria. But there is criteria that goes along with the application.
It looks to me like in at least Flat Iron and possibly Spanish Peaks, there's two groups of SFEs. Some from the Yellowstone Club agreement, but they're asking for more. And that's where we get into, do we have the capacity?
When you say they, are you saying they're both under, quote, the Yellowstone agreement?
Yeah.
Spanish Peaks and
Well,
Flat Iron.
are they all, or is there more
But
than?
no, but I think that both of those properties are based on the Yellowstone agreement. They may have different criteria within the agreement. Is that an accurate statement? You see that, John, that they're both under the blanket agreement?
Correct.
Okay, 0203, whatever. Oh,
But they're very specifically defined per project.
Yeah.
Brian, can I jump in for a second? So what, by accepting it with a, I believe we've done, we acknowledge that they've submitted an application.
Yeah.
And now the real work begins on it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to approve it or reject it,
100%.
but it means that we're acknowledging it and now we can get things moving.
yeah. In fact, I think we're somewhat required to give an answer, either accept or reject it. I'm not saying accept it. I'm saying we have to give an answer. We're going to accept this application or reject it. Like I said, someone coming in from another area, not adjacent to it, doesn't have the SFEs, we don't have excess capacity, we probably would reject that application because it doesn't fit the ordinance, correct? And then there may be a discrepancy or an issue with the DEQ issue on how many feet from a public service. So I think the question is, do you, at this point, it's either accept or reject.
I'm still not comfortable with the boundaries. Let's use Flat Iron at the moment. We're annexing more than was in the original Yellowstone Club agreement, aren't we? They're asking for more.
We don't know, but I'm going to ask.
They're asking for more land, not more SFEs.
What's that?
They're asking, bring in more land, not asking for more SFEs.
So we're still at 850 some additional SFEs.
Just like Boyne is asking to bring in more land, not additional SFEs. I actually only have two, the fire department and Patricia, that are outside of any form of agreement or flow-based agreement. So I have to evaluate, do we have capacity? Do we have them in a place of use and stuff like that? So those are a little bit more, but in those two cases, for those two, they're only asking to annex in more land, not asking for more SFEs outside of there.
And I don't know, again, this is criteria based. I'm going to ask you the question. Is this additional land or is it a boundary line adjustment of the land that's in the district?
No, Flat Iron is additional,
Okay.
and they're in no man's land in between
Okay.
our mountain and.
They have the two two counties. Again, the motion was basically to say, we've got to make a decision one way or another. They're here. Do we start the negotiation for, quote, an agreement with the legal team, or do we reject it? And if we reject it, we just have to say why we're rejecting. Was it a criteria-based rejection? Nick, you still?
Yeah. I thought the last time we had talked, this is in Susan's ballpark right now. Were we waiting a recommendation from her?
Not on accepting an application. She's talking about, I think how I see this is we're working our way through the Spanish Peaks bullet points. For consistency purposes, we're looking to try to overlay some of that or mirror some of those requirements or quote conditions that are applicable.
So,
Because
Mr. Chairman, I hate to interrupt, but I will. Instead of using the word accepting, I would prefer that the board begin processing these applications.
Okay.
And in that way, you still have all of the flexibility to be able to say, yes, we're going forward. Yes, we would annex this if we have these agreements in writing under an annexation agreement. Yes, we have these limitations. Yes, we recognize that this is not the same legal description, and we need to look at the service areas, and that all needs to get documented. So instead of using the word accepting, I'd prefer you use the word we will begin processing them.
It's semantic, but I'm more comfortable with that.
Okay, I think it's a good clarification process. It's that other level of detail that it may be kicked back, but at least we're moving. I mean, my goal was just to make a decision, but Al, would you be all right amending your motion to processing versus accepting?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Mike's okay with the second? Discussion? Any other discussion?
So are we asking, Johnny to give us more information on what's in the package?
Well, as the next meeting, he would begin to process the application. And then he would come to us with a report saying, okay, these are the things that are either not in compliance or need to be addressed in the conditions or need to be a part of the agreement as he processes the application.
Okay.
And I like that term process for this reason. He's gonna go through that same protocol with each one of these. And if it's doesn't fit, he's gonna, he has to recommend you kick it back.
Yeah. Sure.
All right? Okay,
So I guess the only question I'd ask then is it necessary that the board make a motion to process an application? Or do we just start processing and get more information? When we're accepting the application, it seemed like, okay, we're making a formal acknowledgement that there's an application. Now that we're just processing it, we just process it.
well, I think it's a step forward. It's a step towards, if nothing happens, it's just kind of sitting there dormant. And right now, there's really no use in having a subcommittee if they have an application in and we're not, quote, processing it.
The way I see it is if we were going from accepting right into working on agreements, this kind of gives you an extra step.
Yeah.
Before you move into an agreement, I can work with Susan, we can process it and then make a staff recommendation to say, we recommend moving forward with, working into an agreement, or we can recommend that we don't accept this application or.
I think it's well said, that it's the next step in you to recommend to the board. If it just sits there, we're not gathering the data or I think it needs to be processed no matter what. Yeah. And
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think technically we don't need to, but if that helps everybody, track the timelines of things, I don't see any reason that it's problematic.
So when we get that report, what I'd like to see is more information on what is being annexed beyond what was in the YC agreement. What's being asked for in the terms of, let's use the term doors for now. And what does that mean in SFEs? And is it in compliance with the Yellowstone Club agreement, the 850 or whatever?
and I think the key,
I mean, so we're not opening a door to, well, yeah, here's 850, but we really want another 1,000.
Yeah.
So
I think
what potential it's opening?
I think it actually takes us to that fork in the road of if we're going to negotiate. If the board decides they'd like to negotiate, or the applicant would like to petition for flow-based being SFE, it just takes us to that next.
Yeah.
It's in a flow chart is what it is. And if there's another process, it's figured out, but we just have to follow it for everybody. I think anybody who has a annexation agreement, and we have to just follow a process.
Mhm.
Did we have a motion to accept either the Spanish Peaks, and we'll use process, but the Spanish Peaks or Housing Trust applications?
We had motions to move forward with the
Yeah.
agreements. That's what we're working on.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to do, is just,
Yeah.
the last thing I want to do is have all these things stall and then they pile on at the same time. But, and it may, I was hoping to be more efficient for Susan. Okay,
We call the question.
I'd love to call the question. All in favor?
Processing.
Processing. Al amended his language, much so. Good catch. All right, opposed? Okay. Thank you. By the way, that was just kind of an audible, and once I saw it in the committee report, so we go from there. Takes us to business action items then, unless anybody has a committee report that they want to get information on or address. Business action item, Johnny.
So this is the last piece to the whole policy, and it's our training and staffing, training and development, and how we're gonna develop our staff. Me and Amy and the superintendent, so we went through so the criteria, all the training that's offered for those sections. And then we had an objective list that staff has to go through for their core jobs, and then any eventual cross training through. So what's in the board packet is the actual document, and then the objectives. What's not in there is what the staff has to fill out. But you see the criteria in the objectives sheet, everything that has an X and how they, get to the next level. This is so we can track the time and effort we're putting into training and developing our staff for everything that they do. This is a living document, so it'll be reviewed, and as we stop doing something and swap over to a new objective or whatever, we'll upgrade or change those. But the core fundamental of the actual document won't change, because those are all the recommended trainings that we would attend, conferences or online or whatnot. So it's a pretty comprehensive document, and this just gives staff the big picture on how they can develop internally, and then we can have new members coming in, and they have that document and invest in themselves, because we're definitely investing in them as well. So just puts everything in a cohesive document that covers career development as well as safety and on the job training. It puts it all in one place, so they can look at it and see, hey, this is what I need to do to be able to get from A to B.
Great time. Probably a good time. First of all, it's helpful for what Mike and I have been talking about as well, about the review process. Again, this is kind of an audible, but it fits in with what you're talking about here. And Mike's really put together a nice template for review. And you're our first case, because we're behind on reviewing Johnny for his agreement at hire. So we've spent some time since the last meeting talking about this template. It's great, it's comprehensive. We're not really looking to rush anything, and it was kind of at the last few days that we said, hey, we got to now get on a schedule with this. Like a lot of things we're going to talk about today, how do we just get it on a schedule so we don't miss an opportunity? But the goal is to circulate this template and get some feedback from the board. I want to make it clear, Johnny has the choice. And I did talk to Susan about this, make sure we go through the proper procedures of doing this in a public forum or a public meeting, or doing it or going through this review process in a closed meeting, executive session. So that'll be his choice, but the board has the choice. And that's what we're here for today, is to just say this, we're going to circulate this for feedback, but the board really has that choice of saying, we'd like to participate or subcommittee it, or how we'd like to handle the review process. So rather than get the cart before the horse, we'll circulate that, but would like the opportunity to fine tune what's out there right now, what's been started with feedback from the board, and how you'd like to manage it. Because I think in the future, it'll be a good boilerplate for how Johnny works with his team if it's successful with Johnny. If it's not successful, we'll be back to the drawing board.
Well, that's
Successful.
like to add to that, so this does tie into their performance reviews to help set goals and all that stuff. By the bylaws and by our policies and procedure, the board president is actually supposed to review them all to make sure that they're all copacetic. We chose performing yards so we can actually, I can look at this template and we can marry it in. But it was really difficult when we were setting that up for me because I get my directive from you guys. So, you know, what are my goals? What are my objectives? What do I need to do? But, you know, we can send stuff out to outside our department. So, you know, incorporating that all in, but this all ties into that nut.
This is great timing for this. We're a little behind now, but like I said, Mike's got a great start on access.
Actually, you're kind of ahead because we opened up the performance reviews in May to be completed.
Okay, well, the board's behind, okay? Because Johnny was supposed to review months ago.
I was just gonna tie it in.
He wasn't saying a word. I bring up the word review and say, hey, you want another cup of coffee? So that's where we're at. This is open. It's great. I feel like it's the first time we've approached it and with this process in this way. And, you know, a lot came out of when Ron was planning his retirement that put us at a higher level of attention, that's all. So thoughts from the board? We'll circulate that, and this just pretty much got put to bed over the weekend even, but between now and the next meeting, we'd like to get a schedule and a plan and feedback and direction from the board. Please.
Which means,
It means, okay, format, let's talk about it. Does the board want to be, is this a board review or is this a subcommittee review? That'd be the first thing I'd say.
It seemed, I'll go throw some thoughts. It seems like it'd be more efficient if a subcommittee worked on it and then maybe give the rest of the board the opportunity to review before it went final.
Okay. The in-person, would it be a board evaluation or subcommittee evaluation or filling out the form? It's an extensive form. It's really nicely done. So just thoughts on how it would go. If Johnny says, let's have it in a meeting, I think it's a different format. If you say, Johnny, you know, I'd like it in closed session, then we do it after a meeting. Maybe the board stays on, maybe they don't. It's just, we want to just get a kind of this in a box so that we can use it in the future. We want to include the board, of course, in this and get all the feedback we can.
The way our performing yard set up, all the board members would be able to provide input. I kind of envisioned it being in front of a committee. And then because I am the executive director, then, you know, my evaluation is brought to the board to accept on the final after we've had all that stuff.
We've all worked.
On the public session, or do you want it a closed session?
I think once it's brought to final, I mean, it's, everybody's voting on it to accept it. And, you know, I've already done all that stuff, so, I mean, kind of through the subcommittee, I kind of think it sets it up behind closed doors, but I can let Susan weigh in on that. I mean,
I think it's up to you though, if it's behind closed doors or if it's open.
I did ask Susan that, and it's your choice. And again, those are the two scenarios where we circulate this immediately. We just want to make sure we're on the right path. I mean, if the board said, you know what, I've got a great template that I would like to use, or I want to do it this way, we'd of course discuss it and we move forward in that direction of what the board sees for consensus. Right now, we have something that we can circulate, get the feedback today on the format. And I did, and Susan said specifically, it's your choice. It's whether it's in a meeting just like this, or it's a publicly, or it's notified, notice possible, the way it should be. And then we go to the format that you choose. This is your choice.
in my opinion, the way I see it, and that's, you know, that's the way the system's set up. I'm not really in the system that everybody else is. Because I have to approve everybody else's, but my directives and stuff come from the board. We're working with Lori Addicks. I've seen that she had already sent over a proposal for a strategic strategy session. So, I think coupled with that is we have that meeting, goals and objectives and strategy is set forth. That's what I'm measured on, however it works into this template. And then, you guys get to review that. It gets sent out. Everybody gets to put in input. And then I think it's reviewed by the committee. And then the committee says, we have those discussions. Whether the committee recommends we do it, in public forum or behind the scenes.
I'm going to interrupt right here because I feel like we're getting a disconnect, and I don't think anybody needs to make a decision on whether the final general manager evaluation is in public or private at this point in time. So I'm going to ask you just to table that part of the conversation and start the process.
Okay, there you go. Great. You can be thinking about it. Yeah, all right.
Do we have a pre-existing subcommittee for that? Is that the staff?
The budget, CIP was also the policy and procedure committee, so kind of dual purpose as we go through, because like right now, we're in the budget CIP, it's only a few months, policy and procedures, like once a year now, we got this stuff done. That same committee, kind of overseeing evaluations when we get them all done.
What do you see as the next step, since you're part of that as well?
Well, I think what you send out will help us kind of, globally see what it is, but maybe it is. I think what Johnny's recommending makes sense. The CIP committee is the subcommittee that kind of takes on feedback and tries to put it in a document. And then we're in position to, after the rest of the board has been able to see the compiled information, presented to Johnny in whatever format makes sense down the road.
Okay. What do you think about timeline? Again, no rush on it, but timeline to the CIP subcommittee gathers the information, has a meeting, fills out these forms, tries to come to consensus on what's out there, circulate to the rest of the board, so it's in the board packet for the next meeting, and then set a time to you adopt it at that meeting, and then set a time for the sit down review in whatever forum that everybody agrees to. Is that, is there anything that is confusing in that? I just want to make sure it's very important. I mean, this is.
No, but as Susan said, I think we can talk about that, because that's not in this strategic plan for development and stuff. I'm actually outside of that.
Okay,
So
I did bring a calendar this time, so maybe we could all talk about, start filling in these dates for these subcommittees, see if we can make them as efficient as possible. All right. Don't really need to take an action item. I think everybody.
well, we need to adopt
On yours, yeah, I'm sorry, what you have.
The manual.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want to make sure that we keep separation, so it's just, we don't have to backpedal on it. So then if you're done with that discussion on district training and development plan, I'll entertain a motion on the district training and development plan.
Make a motion to approve the plan.
Okay, Mike,
Second.
with Dick. Discussion? All in favor? Okay, opposed? Carried unanimously. Thanks for jumping on that, Johnny. That's a lot of work. That was a lot of time. People forget that you're still running the team here. Okay, whole business, capital improvements plan. This is where the rubber meets the road on a few things. Scott, you want to step up? Do we have Mace online, or is he?
Mace is online.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. Start as usual with the plan. Finishing up punch listing, Adam, is that going to your satisfaction?
Yeah, we're close. CRSA in the spring for a little bit and then. All good.
Okay, and plant performance, still
It's rocking.
good deal. Talked to Terry a little bit before the meeting. We have a couple of
remnant deals, centrifuge and pond two second clean out. RSCI would rather not have anything to do with the pond clean out. We had discussed running that under their contract. They would if we absolutely threw a fit and forced them to, but they would prefer that they not be involved in that. And I understand. I think it just means that we have a little bit more contractual front-end coverage with the company that is going to clean it out, which I believe would be Denali. And I asked Freeling and Josh to set up a meeting with Terry and Johnny to start to nail down onto clean out centrifuge. Centrifuge will be here in about a month, I believe, maybe quicker. And getting that project incorporated into the plant. And then we have a minor deal with a intake filter on a maple berry unit that we need to get paid for. So that's it on treatment and infrastructure down there. Any questions on that? Maybe middle of next week. So
Yeah, I kind of figured we'd be putting scopes and stuff together to finalize all that. I didn't see it going through RSCI on either one.
good.
So, you know, put it out to bid, get a contractor, and we have the scope and fees and all that stuff, so.
Yeah. Trent's a good guy and wants to keep you all happy, but he's kind of tapped out on the project and getting pressure from up high to just do post warranty and not do anything with. Okay. The reuse booster station project, the only piece of this we're doing is the land, nailing down the land and the permits. And supporting Adam on YC1 switch out, which my understanding has not been going very well. That was last week's news, so.
More will be known this week, but we're having some issues with a couple of the pumps. Essentially between our vendor and manufacturer at this time. More will be known here tomorrow, the next day when Kirk's on stage.
Okay. How long have you been? Well, you've been down for months from pumping up the mountain. Any idea? Are you worried at all about this eating into when you'd like to be back up and running up the mountain?
Everything's gonna go great. We're gonna get these pumps rolling and start moving some water here in the next month.
Okay, any questions there? Does everybody understand what we're doing out there? YC1, it's, we have those old exotic, multi-stage centrifugals and we're replacing those with vertical booster style pumps from Western Industrial. On paper spec, pumps should be capable of giving us a little bit more capacity up the mountain, but startup is not turning out that way so far, so.
We're seeing out of our initial testing, so we've had a couple of weird electrical issues going on the skids. And then I'll fill you in a little bit more in detail.
Okay.
Outside of this, but we should know more this week.
What's the total target pumping rate for up the mountain?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but 380 or.
Yeah, 400.
500?
400,000 gallons a day. We haven't tested the pumps long enough to really gain an understanding.
On the new pumps?
Yeah.
The old pumping system was 300 gallons a minute, something like that?
Yep. We had, for lack of better words, without going too much into details, there was a lot of rebuilds on those pumps, so we didn't really necessarily have good flow characteristics and data on them. So with this new setup, we should be pushing more volume than we had out of the old setup for sure.
Great.
Canyon District, we have a joint gaming meeting February 7th. We'll talk about the project overall, I guess, first. I'm curious if you all have been dragged into the interlocal agreement with the Canyon and this is being made on that to ultimately have one entity.
I know Susan and, sorry, Mace, I forgot her name, but.
Tara
Tara, we're going back and forth on that. a rough draft, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
We haven't really moved it forward.
And kind of in parallel, memorandum of understanding on the money, eventually working towards that. Just want to make sure we're, because I'm not involved in those and, don't have any control over them, but I believe we want those by early summer, because that's when we are scheduled to be procuring the GCCM outfit contractor. We want that under ideally one contract, and for you all to enter that agreement, I think you'll want reassurance that the financial model works for you.
Yeah, I think we signed a joint resolution agreeing to move forward with the selection of a contractor. And at the same time, interlocal agreement was being drafted. We haven't presented any.
Okay. There's a couple of hurdles that we're trying to overcome. One is this deviation request for putting two pipes down the canyon without the full separation that DEQ would like with raw sewage and reuse water. There's not a lot of precedence for having those two pipes in the same trench. The regulations that DEQ is leaning on are about having drinking water and raw sewage in the same trench. So we've been hammering away at them that this is not drinking water. This is reuse water. This is going to be used for irrigation or groundwater disposal. They're still not given much ground. So we're getting ready to take what I'd say is really our, May's helped me out here, but probably our third technical swing at them. Depending on where that goes, I think we'll ultimately need the owners and stakeholders to come sit down with DEQ and at a deviation request hearing, basically, and state your case. And because it does add cost to the project, and we don't believe it's necessary to protect public health. Anything to add there, Mace?
Nothing on the deviation. Provide some other general updates when you finish yours.
Okay.
Scott, is that also advocating some type of, technical shut off system that would, basically be an additional fail safe?
Yeah, great question. We're telling them, we would have pressure monitoring, we would have water quality monitoring. We would know if there was a break in that pipeline. Plus, all the pipe is jointless fused HDPE. We believe we're going above and beyond what's necessary, like I said, to protect public health. We'd have signage on any public access to that water that's coming out of there. You would immediately lose pressure if there was a break. You would know it. It just doesn't make any sense to us, but they're holding their ground right now.
So, as far as our involvement, potentially a tech review meeting, petition meeting, the Water and Sewer District, the Gallatin Water and Sewer District, potentially resort tax, since they're associated with funding, all this, and potentially that could preclude us even doing the project if they specify. I mean, that's a considerable additional expense, correct?
Yeah, we have been very conservative at the pipeline cost estimate because we didn't know exactly where this was going to go. It's a long story, but ideally they want 10 feet of separation. We talked to them early and they said, okay, we'll take a single trench, but we want the pipes at different elevations inside there, which makes absolutely no difference because they're 80, 100 PSI. There's a break, a foot of vertical separation means absolutely nothing. So it's been that sort of a battle, but I think before we would give up, we would want you all to be able to state your case and the importance of the project for the community. And yeah, I mean, that cost model, as we all know, is not infinite, right? At some point, the project just becomes untenable financially, and it's a big, expensive project. For all the right reasons, or we're doing it for all the right reasons. So I think we need to go make that case to them eventually.
It seems like a minor detail, but it really has a much broader impact on all of the finances of these projects.
Yeah,
being able to happen or not.
it's the death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like we can handle cost increases, but at some point it just breaks camel's back. Which brings me to the second challenge, which we discussed at that February 7th meeting where Waterkeeper is telling us that they don't agree that we could discharge the groundwater down there or get a permit to do so. So we wanted to hear that out. It's a very technical argument. It's about their belief is that all groundwater down there is connected to the main stem of the Gallatin, or would prove to be so by the Maui County decision that was 2020, which basically said that if groundwater is directly connected to a surface water, then any of those discharges would be a surface water discharge. Waterkeeper claimed that you couldn't get a surface, so it'd be equivalent of a surface water discharge in their opinion, and that we cannot get a surface water discharge permit right now because the river's recently been deemed impaired and is under a TMDL study, which is probably going to take another 3 years of DEQ looking at the river to determine what they believe it needs to not have algal blooms in the future. So both sides kind of hearing each other out on that. Waterkeeper, I think, thought they'd be as simple as adding more treatment. Adding what treatment we had in this building over here for eventually drinking the reused water. That's not necessarily true from just a pure nitrogen perspective, which is everybody's concern with the main stem of the Gallatin. So there's just a lot of education of all parties going on right now of what the actual issues are, what additional treatment may or may not get you. And then there's still work to be done to determine if they are correct and that we wouldn't be able to obtain a permit down there. Our DGS and DEQ are saying that's not our understanding of the Clean Water Act. You can still get a surface water discharge permit even when you're under impairment and under a TMDL study. So I believe Mace is charging ahead with the application for that permit down there. Is that correct, Mace?
Yeah, charging ahead there and also addressing some of the criteria that Guy was referencing in terms of when it's deemed a surface water discharge and review through that program versus a groundwater. So really diving into the nuts and bolts because we were talking high level in that kickoff meeting and we want to get down to the numbers. So
Yeah, it's gone that advanced treatment, the next stage.
It's just shelved. Yeah, it's very expensive. I believe we were at about $18 million for 200 gallons per minute skid that would take it to drinking water standards, which are still evolving, but California, Texas, Arizona, Florida have standards, and we know what those treatment skids have to look like to meet those. So the engineering of that system that's inside there was based on that. I have confidence that you could take that water, put it into your aquifer, pull it back out and drink it, but it would need piloting with DEQ. DEQ's hasn't done any potable reuse in this. They know it's coming. But we would have to do probably 2 years of piloting to prove to DEQ, the community, board, everybody, us, that it works and it's safe. But it's a different criteria you're shooting for on the quality and treatment on that for potable reuse. You could actually drink water that we couldn't discharge into the Gallatin River because of nitrogen. So a little bit of work to be done, I believe, on educating all of us on what that nitrogen looks like that's coming out of the plant now. Some people think it's nitrate, some people think it's nitrate and ammonia, some people like me know that it's nitrate, ammonia, and organic nitrogen. It's really, we're doing about the limited technology. What's left is often called recalcitrant organic nitrogen. Adam's going to try to get a little more testing on it so we could show Waterkeeper what we're dealing with. Potentially there's piloting if we want to push that we could and do deserve a groundwater discharge permit. So don't want to necessarily give that up either. But out of the whole conversation, came more positivity towards snowmaking than pretty much anything else. And, you know, we don't have time to, spend 5-10 years, letting some of these, pathways play out fully. We're gonna have to have a project at some point, to expand reuse capacity, whether it's the canyon, Firelight Meadows, or potable reuse out of this facility, or more snowmaking. And snowmaking is probably the lowest hanging fruit from a treatment perspective and a permitting perspective. It's taken Low Mountain Land quite a while to get Yellowstone Club snowmaking permit. They still don't have Spanish Peaks, but we know there's a path there. And there's general favorability from Waterkeeper towards snowmaking, so I just want to plant the seed that we may need to develop a project there so that we have something in the works, so that when we do need that additional capacity, we can go get it.
What would the timeline be like if we pressed go on the advanced treatment, do you think, to now to when we would actually realize, potable reuse water being produced?
Well, the main issue would be the $18 million.
Of course.
And whether or not you're going to get state and federal assistance.
Yeah, I'm talking more just for
the money was no factor.
Yeah.
Probably max a year of additional planning and engineering, and then you'd be procuring equipment and getting it installed with the contractor, probably 2 years. I would give yourselves 2 years to pilot it and prove out the end quality of that water, develop a plan of where you're going to put it, either directly in the distribution system or in the aquifer. While you're testing it, you can just put the treated water back in the ponds and irrigate, so you have a nice loop there that you can do your testing on. So 4 or 5 years before you're ready to go. And you have a lot of public engagement to do to educate them as well during that time, because it's unusual this far inland and north.
Yeah, and just to be clear, not necessarily heading toward potable reuse, but having that high level of treated water expands our reuse options. Could be blended with other waters, groundwater injection if it came to issues in the canyon, it gives us more flexibility.
True, just keep in mind they're slightly different targets, and they're both tiny little targets that are 5 miles away, because they're tough to hit, right? But one is for potable reuse and one would be for putting it in the ground and hitting the West Fork or the main stem or wherever we are in the world. Slightly different criteria, one's going more after taking nitrogen as close to nothing as we possibly can. The other one's all about public health and pathogen.
Which in a lot of ways is easier
than
getting that nitrogen.
Right.
And then I think we should just keep track of that $18 million number as we look at taking on more responsibilities for other systems, annexation agreements, whatnot, what that means down the road. And reuse, we're going to need options, we're going to need places to do this, so it's all part of the larger planning process that we're looking at in the next couple of months. Looking at expanding services.
We have conceptual or even preliminary engineering on several avenues of reuse or groundwater discharge for you. It's just going to come down to picking the one that is the most cost effective, and push and go, in the next 5 years.
Just as a reminder, we started the plan upgrade. It was going to be the stall wall. Everybody was on board. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, you're always the guy that does great. But it was, you do this plan and life is going to be good and everybody's going to be happy. And wow, that's something to be proud of. Well, now here we are. And what I heard from that call, it was a half an hour of listening. taking notes in the little notebook that I have here. And, it was no. Now it's, now it doesn't matter what we do in the canyon, it will have opposition. That's what I heard in that call, that we will not, even if it drops and improves again by 50% or 80%, we'll oppose it because you need to get a permit. This was listening, that's all. It's not even taking a stand. What I did hear though is, Jamie, and that's why disposal is such a big priority now, was snowmaking. It just kept hearing snowmaking, snowmaking, snowmaking. Then it was, what about the snowmaking? And then it was very simple. If we can stop moving the goalposts, it comes down to treatment and time to get to the source. So we're talking Middle Fork, West Fork, whatever. So I think and not to dismiss what you just said, but 18 million is going to turn into 30 million. That's our history. It's not my guessing. It's just what it happens. Everything we do seems to move. No one's fault. These are the times we live in. So what we are hearing right now is snowmaking. I mean, is that kind of what you were hearing in that same call? That snowmaking was forget the canyon. Forget the canyon. Any disposal in the canyon, forget the canyon disposal unless you're going to upgrade the plant with 18 to 30 million. Stick with snowmaking, stick with treatment, stick with time. That seemed to be the caveat.
I agree. The general tone was much more open to snowmaking, depending on location. In the canyon, and I think the difference that Brian's alluding to of I thought MVR would be the end all be all was that we would be class A-1, which reads, if you're class A-1, you don't even need a groundwater discharge permit. Where Riverkeeper is coming from is they're saying, except when you're connected to a surface water and you're injecting groundwater, then you need a permit. And they're willing to go to the wall on that. We point blank asked them, even if we took, let's say just for conversation purpose, let's call it, there's X pounds of nitrogen going into the ground in the canyon every day right now from septics and level 2 systems. Even if we knock that down by half, we couldn't do that. And I think what they're saying at this point is show us the data. And maybe, but we have the permitting framework to oppose that. And we will, if we don't believe that you're going to improve the conditions in the main stem.
And then the comment was made, correct me if I'm wrong in this one, Rick. So you're telling me, even with that reduction, that well, you're making perfect the enemy of great. I said yes. Not saying he's right, wrong, or anything. It just made me say, boy, you could spend years going at this down here, and everything he talked about from the Maui to all the way down. But I just kept hearing treatment and time, no making. I was surprised, but I guess I think the board needs to understand that part of it, that seemed to be, you even used the term low hanging fruit. But disposal seems to be our biggest priority, and it used to be treatment. Yeah. We chase treatment. Pretty damn proud of that treatment, but now it's disposal.
Running these parallel paths is good, Mason's permit and just, we'll see how things play out. And it goes back to the capital improvement plan ROI and how do we make snowmaking work and the economics of that work. There's just a lot of play. And I think no matter what, we're spending $18 to $30 million on something. Just to get all this to come together.
Pick your poison. You're going to be doing something here.
Something's going to have to happen.
But it's progress. Rather than us just say, we'll deal with this later. I mean, it's progress. I was shocked at it, but that's what we are. We've got to prioritize disposal. I mean, that's our most important thing.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have to make those decisions on. We're pretty comfortable with the treatment level, but how do we get to that disposal?
Firelight I've brought up as low hanging fruit before, and Firelight disposal would also be connected to groundwater, potentially connected over here. But all this comes down to how much time. Is it 90 days away from the creek or the river? Is it 190 days? Is it 5 years? And whether or not DEQ and the courts would say, okay, that's not surface water. That's a groundwater discharge there, then it becomes easier. So I would say, don't necessarily give up on Firelight, but we brought that up as are you gonna take the same stance there? And Waterkeeper's reaction almost 4 times out of 5 is show me the data. Show me the data and maybe. My main point is that we have all these parallel paths. We have 4 or 5 things that we have somewhat developed. At some point pretty soon, we're gonna have to pick one and go to the jugular on it.
Treatment time and distance, those are the ones that.
Firelight, we pulled all that information together, though, doesn't that, well, that's kind of the data they're looking for.
A whole nother level of data.
You have the impairment.
A lot of
Fair enough.
data.
I thought we did a lot of work on.
Yeah, we have it. I don't know if it's data that. Yeah, it was interesting to hear that. I was surprised we talked about, isn't it? Firelight as much as we did.
Yeah, I just, it might be a little further from the surface water than say a rapid infiltration basin in the canyon would be the main stem. I don't know that for sure. And Cunane did a lot of time travel aquifer modeling on Firelight, but then we stopped that work because Firelight declined to participate financially. Stance was, well, we're not going to carry all the weight for Firelight on collecting data, for example. And so we, and you still would, right? Like some of these projects are not just going to have technical challenges; they're going to have issues of ownership and jurisdiction.
The same thought process that you put into the Firelight, project would be the same thing for the canyon. It's basically moving that forward. Same process is what they're looking for.
Yep. Yeah, and Waterkeeper is leaning pretty hard on the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology's groundwater study down in the canyon that nobody has really seen the results of. All Sensor says they're telling him it's going to be published within weeks. And so we're all waiting on that to see what it says about the connectivity of groundwater to surface water down there. MBMG did a study up here on this aquifer. Cunane did a study. Like we know a lot, but the data collection that we would need to get a permit for any of these is going to be another level of collecting and reporting. Just be ready.
State wouldn't ask for that though, but the Waterkeeper would. So if you,
DEQ would.
they would.
Yeah, they're gonna keep a pretty high bar on any of these discharges when we actually move to, hey, we want the permit, and we'll see WGM's permit application down in the canyon, how much more, if any, data they're gonna want to permit that. But it's a little bit different down there because initially we're just taking over existing drain fields, leach fields, ribs that are already down there. With that, I think it's a good segue to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's great. You have the 1-2 punch call too.
Yeah.
Helpful to hear the 1-2. And I think the biggest surprise, and we'll go right to Mace, was this, that I expected the improvement, the how extensive the improvement was of the treatment and everything we're talking about, whether it's Firelight, the canyon, and all these great things that are happening, there'd be some level of credit there. And not criticizing, it's just there isn't that level of credit for the things we would be doing to improve these environments. And we just got kind of tunnel vision on some things, but hey, everyone's at the table.
Can I ask a question before we move on to me? So, and maybe this is obvious to everyone else, but I just want to summarize in my own head. When we're talking about Waterkeeper, they're not involved at all in the approval process. So they're just suggesting that if they're not in alignment with what we're proposing, that they will either lobby or pressure DEQ not to approve it, or
They would
sue
litigate.
DEQ if it
Litigate.
Yeah,
They would litigate.
they review everything DEQ does pretty much, at least in the upper Missouri watershed. That's, should clarify that the Waterkeeper is a national organization with chapters. And the chapter we're dealing with is the upper Missouri Waterkeeper. And they've litigated against DEQ and EPA before on these issues and are heavily involved here locally in data collection and this effort or struggle by the district to develop more discharge and or reuse.
There wasn't any reading between the lines. It was litigation the timeline. It was, well, we don't want to spend 5 years litigating this right now, but these are the terms and conditions.
And we had DEQ in the room, her mic wasn't, the director, and her mic wasn't working unfortunately. But we're trying to drag them together, and they do unfortunately tend to prepare their permitting with litigation from third parties in mind.
To your point, Al, they'd be happy to have DEQ approve the permit, and then that gives them more grounds to go after somebody else, including us, go after DEQ as well, because they permitted it. So this would be, they're happy to let us go through this whole process and then at the very end come in and review it all.
Well, I think it was wise that we had this session to listen, so that we understand the challenges. I'm hopeful that they listen too, though, because obviously what they brought to the table is something we want to consider, but hopefully they understand. I mean, look at the talent we have in the room as well that's looking to provide solutions. And so I'm hopeful that there's listening happening on both sides.
Yeah, good intentions aren't quite as valuable as you think. Process.
Well, I think I'm excited to hear Mace on this too, because Mace was definitely a little more optimistic. He's got the smile on in that picture up there. And
All under control, guys. Just kidding.
You had DGS there, you all paid to have DGS there, and that's what we would rely on them for, Al, is what do you think of these legal arguments? Do they stand up? Are they, can they be overcome, or are they roadblocks?
And I did share her input, and then I asked her specifically on clarification for time and distance, which she gave. As Brian would say, I asked her for the time, she told me how to build the watch, but it's case by case. So we have to provide the data. You go back to it's data and what that is to provide. So with that, we'll turn it over to Mace.
Yeah. Yeah, I would argue, or I'd say that the main thing the waterkeeper's tracking is whether this should be reviewed as a MPDES permit. So basically reviewed as federal criteria that DEQ administers versus a DEQ groundwater discharge permit. And the differentiator there isn't whether or not our groundwater discharges ends up in the river. It's how fast it ends up in the river, among 6 other factors. And the biggest, I guess, discrepancy or potentially a misunderstanding is I think Guy is seeing some past documentation and believing it's 3 weeks to get to the river. So if we discharged, say, in the school's drain field, for example, his assumption would be it's three weeks and it gets to the river, where in reality, that aquifer is bigger and it's longer, and the time and distance works out to be on the scale of 30 weeks, potentially longer. And that's where we're waiting for MBMG to really provide their findings. So WGM's ran our numbers. We believe it's, depending on where we're discharging, well north of 3 weeks and more on that 300-day scale. So that's really the crux of it, and understanding reality and the numbers. And I think MBMG as a third party, I guess, opinion there is going to carry a lot of weight. So that's my optimism, is really the time to river is way longer than Guy believes it to be. But we'll see what the numbers actually come out to be. On a non-waterkeeper aspect, cost control is important to this project. Yes, we could throw more treatment at it. Yes, we can try to cap disposal, but without new development and a number of other cost control mechanisms, the ratepayers in the canyon won't be able to afford this project. And this 4-year, 5-year endeavor to fix nutrient loads to the river all ends up for naught if we can't afford it. So finding that financial model, finding that solution that works, cost control on Highway 64. If we split trenches, that starts to add costs. So we need to balance cost control plus I guess the whole community's interest in how they want to manage wastewater going forward. And if we run into some bottlenecks, I think the canyon will need to start exploring the go it alone option, especially if that Highway 64 corridor starts climbing, but that's down the road. We're not even letting our heads go there. We're staying on the track of the coast solution. So that's my update is we've got more to do with Guy. We'll put it in DEQ's hands and MBMG's hands to really dissect the numbers and continue to look to make the financial model work between the two districts. And in that endeavor, we're working with Ryan Graff, AE2S, and he's kind of tuned into both sides. So that'll be a focus of the upcoming joint committee, I believe.
I would just add, Mace, that all the work that you all are doing on that permit down there doesn't factor in any attenuation of nitrogen from the discharge point to the river. And we know that's not going to be true. Let's say you put, say Adam's cranking out 4 milligrams per liter, or what's coming out of the reservoirs is 3 or 4 milligrams per liter. So we have a class 8-1 compliant effluent. We put that in the ground down there. It's going to travel, whether, river keepers or water keeper says it's 30 days, Mace believes it's 150 days. It's not going to be 4 milligrams per liter when it hits the river. We don't know exactly what it will be, but at some point we may, if we don't want to back down on the legal battle there, we could do some piloting or something to show some attenuation, and it would still, to everybody's point, be much, much better than what we believe is occurring down there right now.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. The merits of groundwater discharge seem to be underappreciated. Like the aquifer does a lot of work from a treatment, polishing, filtration, absorption. It's essentially a giant tertiary treatment process, and quantifying how much work that aquifer is doing is a challenge, but it's doing a fair amount of work in nitrogen polishing and phosphorus absorption. So,
and the previous criterion for the main stem or for these water bodies would be 0.3 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen. So if we're putting in 4, we would be needing it to attenuate, whether it's biological or dilution or all the above, to 0.3 or less there. Waterkeeper is saying, well, it was 0.3, but we have algal blooms down there now, even when it's below 0.3. So we're going to let DEQ study it and potentially develop a new criterion, and maybe that's 0.2. And so that's the challenge.
Hey, Mace, could you clarify on the groundwater injection, the approximate stratigraphy or depth that would happen? Would it be in that alluvial layer down there, or would it be deeper groundwater injection?
everything's shallow discharge, so shallow alluvial layer. On the quarry parcel, it's actually in a perched alluvial or a perched unit. So you actually get a little more filtration, a little more treatment, and then it hits the alluvial. As you work south, you're really going right into the upper alluvial, kind of that coarser unit. So short answer is it's all shallow discharge, no deep injection.
Gotcha. And that's what, 40, 50 feet, something like that, the thickness of the alluvial there?
Yeah, down by the school, I think we've got anywhere from 40 to 60 feet thick, and it thins from south to north. I'd say at Lazy J, that's kind of the hinge point of where it thins out, and it might only be about 10 feet thick at Lazy J. So,
Thanks.
Any questions? Well, our job now, these guys are the 1-2 punch, but our job now is, look, we don't have an infinite budget here. We can't chase in all these options. We have to prioritize, just like you were talking about CDP. Disposal seems to be one of our top priorities if we're going to continue to move forward. And this is a step back, but I think a step forward is that we understand things a little more from the priority level, whether they're attainable or not with a 0.3 over here or not, but what do we want to budget for our number one priority as a team? Do we go after the snowmaking? Do we continue going down that path? I'll circulate everything that you were kind enough to provide yesterday and then emailing this morning at 4:30 a.m. prepping for this. We'll circulate that for the next meeting. So it's not about making a decision today, but what do we, after hearing all that, what do we want to do to prioritize our top priority as a board for disposal? Of course, we go with your recommendation, Johnny, yours, but just kept hearing that darn snowmaking over and over, and like, and zero chance down there. So,
Well, I think on top of that, I think what I heard was topical application, so not just snowmaking, but reuse and irrigation as well.
I'm sorry, in what?
Topical application. It all creates time and distance. That's what it's boilerplate. That's what it comes down to.
Treatment time and distance. I
Treatment
forget.
time and
I'm saying,
distance.
we said, well, we feel like we're chasing the goal line here. With
And
treatment.
Through our capacity and stuff, we came up with the 3 legs. We have the treatment capacity, disposal capacity, and the water use capacity that we're all putting together. And I think that's, we prioritize all of our disposal options. And then what's it gonna cost to do that? So you figure if you're doing high level treatment, now I got another plant to run, that's more personnel, higher cost, energy, all to do what with it. So I think that's what prioritizes is the most efficient, cost-effective process to do it. Irrigation and reuse applications, building infrastructure, expanding infrastructure, regulation, and all plays into it. If we're gonna need additional storage, wetlands that we've talked about, there's a lot of operational stuff coming from the lower Arkansas River Basin that goes into the Mississippi, which we lead into. They have done monitoring and permits, and within the last decade set it at 8 and 1.5 on nitrogen and phosphorus. Like Scott said, the whole nitrogen series, which is ammonia and all that stuff. They were taking water out of the river, treating it and re-injecting it into the aquifer down there, Ogallala, and stuff. So this is all stuff I'm very familiar with, but it all comes into play of time and distance, case by case. We have to collect data, best options moving forward. But, as far as a federal permit or MDES, I mean, it's, again, whether they're saying that you got the short amount of time before you get to a river requires that, could be a very tight permit. And we're having to do testing. One of the biggest tests that we did was a whole effluent toxicity test. And that's where they take very sensitive minnows and you start out with regular water and then they blend it with your effluent until it's 100%. And then they count the survival rate. I've seen effluent come out of plants that had trout in it because trout are very sensitive temperature and all that stuff. The other one is a priority pollutant scan. These tests are done annually and usually every 5 years. So it's just more testing. I have never had a whole effluent toxicity test be less than 100% survival rate. Again, achieved high efficiencies and our discharge has improved rivers and streams. And that's what we're looking for here. And that's been my mindset working with Adam. We may not have a discharge permit, but we're going to operate like we do because I know for a fact we can produce water that is better than the water that's currently in the river. We can improve it. How we go about it, there's a million ways to do it. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and I think we're all looking at that. But it's a pretty big comprehensive list when you start looking at all the options and then what's most effective to the ratepayers into the community and how we're gonna do that.
I think you're headed towards a reuse
prioritization study. You know, some you could work on till, your budgets are in better shape and you could position yourself to tackle one. In the short term, I would do the prioritization work. We have, like I said, with the reuse management plan, the canyon work, I mean, we have 4 or 5 options for you, and we have costs on them. Some of them are based on 5% engineering, some of them are based on 20%, so, but they're decent numbers. The one we don't have would be another snowmaking project, maybe somewhere here in the Meadow Village or down the canyon, wherever it might be, but start to identify what that might look like. More than likely, you would tie it to recreation, like a Nordic trail system, something to do something with the snow versus just make it to make it. And the further you are from surface waters, the better. So I think it's advisable to be working on that. In the meantime, Mace is gonna file the application for the canyon, and we'll just have to, I think, pressure DEQ to give us a response, because they can sit on those for months, and we don't want to just give them the impression that we'll wait on them. I think we apply pressure to them to let us know what they think about it, so that we're ready in a couple of years, no matter what, to fight off one of these projects.
In the meantime, there are gonna be things that are out of our control. You know, we talk about Firelight so much, like it's a foregone conclusion that they're gonna get their district organized. And they lost, great gal that was their spearhead for it. But bottom line, that might be off the table if they can't get their own district going. And guy called me the other day and said, we're sorting through all these people that can vote, can't vote, and man, it's difficult. I said, good luck, man, but you gotta get that district formed. So, and then any suggestions. But they lost someone who was really strong in getting this put to bed and was close, but now it gets a little more complicated with some of those votes. So that may be off the table for us.
Okay.
That's all.
Scott, is that information use management plan, a lot of that there to develop that prioritization scheme? Is it essentially an extension of the reuse management plan?
Yeah, conceptual descriptions of the projects, what they are.
But we need to
The infrastructure would be needed.
budgets basically to those concepts, and then start looking at that.
Yeah, and the budgets are there. We have decent data to give you on cost estimates, and we have. They're in a tech memo. We just need to sit down and say, okay, we've got those 4. They range anywhere from $6 to $20 million. Perhaps we come up with a snowmaking proxy project to say, let's add that to the mix. We start looking at, I think what you would want to do is kind of a probability analysis of success, permitting success and constructability, and choose as much based on that as the capital cost, capital and O&M.
So would you need some from us to move forward with that process?
If you're on board, I mean, I understand, until we figure out rate structures and that we're not, there's not a lot of budget to be launching into big engineering efforts right now. So maybe it's a smallish prioritization tech memo kind of thing. That is.
What about monitoring, just so we can start getting feasibility out of the way? I mean, you and I talked about putting a model together of how much is it per million gallons to snowmake at many feet versus here or there or Nordic, I don't care what it is. Start looking at how much the disposal is per gallon, basically. Same time, if we're going to pursue some of these options, we start monitoring now without breaking the bank on gathering that data. So if we do find something that's a better bet, financially as well, that we're prepared for it. So it's not all of a sudden why you need a 5-year study.
Yeah.
Are there things we should be doing now so that we can explore the feasibility of the options? That's it.
Yeah, I don't know. Is Energy Labs able to break down that nitrogen anymore?
I haven't gotten with Sherry yet.
Okay.
Got a couple messages in there.
But I would say, to Brian's comment, we take plant effluent and irrigation water from either the header or the reservoirs, so we have both. And that's that.
And this is understanding the composition of the organic nitrogen coming off of the irrigation water.
Yeah, I mean, right now, he's breaking it down into ammonia, nitrate, and then everything else. And everything else we're assuming is the organic, recalcitrant stuff.
My initial conversations with Andy Frame, Bridger Analytical, he said it would likely be pretty costly, and if we found a lab to do it for us, it would be somewhat cumbersome in that regard, but I haven't seen any numbers yet, so.
Okay.
Maybe shake that down with energy and we can go down that road.
So maybe we don't have the organic component broken down every month, because it's gonna break the bank, but we do a couple of those. But then every month, and you may already be doing this, but every month we get plant effluent and reservoir irrigation water, reuse water tested for ammonia, nitrate, and.
Yeah, weekly from Bridger Analytical, and then in-house, we do it twice or 3 times a week. So we got a pile of data.
Okay, just keep doing that, and I think that nitrogen is gonna be the biggest hurdle.
And this isn't about finding, a silver bullet out there. It's really finding something that you can use, or if you're absolutely not gonna be able to do it, we just miss it right away. We don't go down that path. Data can help us with the probability of it's cost effective.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Adam's already doing it.
Okay.
So we just keep collecting it on both sources of reuse, because, you do have the ability now to reuse plant effluent directly. So we want to keep an eye on both of them, I think, to know what's happening in the reservoirs, because it's 200 days of storage, things happen. It's slightly different than what's coming out of the plant on a daily basis. It's been great. It's been even better quality in general, what's coming out of the ponds and what's coming out of the plant. So it's all good news. It's just when you get down into these 0.2, 0.3 arguments, you need to know what it is.
I want to go back to Peter. So we've been working on the nutrient removal plan, which we've updated, a reuse management plan, but it sounds to me like we need to do a reuse and disposal master plan like we're doing on the water. And I think that's what we need to put together, a cost so we can get it in the budget to move forward. So scope and feed.
You're close. That was Ron's main complaint of the reuse management plan, was that there was so much stuff in there and he wanted to divide out only what he cares about. It's very close. It shouldn't be, it's not gonna be expensive.
These conversations with partners too, when we don't own the land. So it's great to talk about snowmaking, but when it works, what we want to do is maybe different than what they're gonna do. I think there's just some bigger discussions in those baseline data just on what exists today. If you intend to use snowmaking as a couple-year process, everything's gonna take a lot of time, but that overall, how much water are we talking about, disposal we talking about, where our key opportunities, where could they go in those discussions with partners here? What I need to be partners in group.
And we have to have a financial model now, anything we look at. We talked about, some of the Boyne snowmaking up on the mountain. I think you talked about getting it to the bottom of the loan moves. What was that number to just get it up to that?
35 million. It's a built pump station down here and a new pipeline that would go up Lone Mountain to
Flat Iron?
to the far side of Lone Moose.
Metro?
And that did not include a reservoir, which
Imagine 35 million just to get them teed up where they can make snow. Now the infrastructure to make snow, I can tell you, I doubt the infrastructure on the mountain is compliant with the permitting that's gone on at Spanish Peaks or Yellowstone Club.
right.
I mean, that infrastructure would have to be rebuilt. We should, I keep getting back to the financial modeling and all this stuff.
Would you go around the back on that and go through Spanish Peaks? I'm not sure, John, point of view on that?
Not a very loaded question.
You're on tape, John.
Yeah.
We haven't modeled those options yet.
Yeah.
All you had to do was say 35 million. nothing against the budgeting, but if it's 35, what is it in 10 years? That's the hard part.
Well, I think
What's
doing the master
infrastructure?
plan, we can tie in some preliminary modeling and stuff, because you gotta build infrastructure. So.
I don't think you would though, because then you gotta pump it up through this 8-inch steel pipeline that we already know is kind of tapped out. They'd have to store it, and then we'd have to pump it again.
Yeah.
Over to the resort side of the mountain, and then we'd have to pressurize it again for Chad's group, and they'd have to operate the high pressure snow guns. It's not, we've described it as low hanging fruit, but it's not inexpensive because it's a lot of high pressure pipelines.
Well, I don't think that's low hanging fruit yet at all.
That certainly is not.
No.
When I say low hanging fruit, I'm thinking here in
Yeah.
Meadow Village somehow, whether it's Nordic trails or sled hill, or, we need to be creative about creating a recreation with it down here, or piggybacking on the trails that are already here.
All right. Mace, anything else?
I'm trying to, I can look at this from the big picture. And what it seems to me like, in the canyon right now, we're chasing our tail. No matter what we do to improve the water going into the river, it's not gonna be good enough. 15, 20, $30 million, we're still running up to show us the data that you're improving it. And even if you're improving it,
Is it enough?
it's not gonna be enough. So I'm wondering if we need, maybe in the back of our minds, be looking harder and harder at the canyon. It's gonna take a lot of money to improve that plant, to possibly not get any approval to finally implement it. And that's why I'm coming back to the no bid.
Yeah. It's disposal. We just keep talking disposal acceptable.
And we're looking at disposal down there, but the disposal there is where we're running into the roadblock.
Well, there's zero disposal, according to him, but the other thing everyone has to think about, that the big budget item that we're struggling with is $24 million plan expansion. That'll soon be 29 million or something. So that 24 million is just a starter. That just gets us to where we can take their needs and treat it. Same thing with Firelight. So modeling, financial modeling, we just don't have an endless bucket here. So.
To Dick's point, we're not putting blinders on to that issue. We do talk about, okay, at some point the project becomes untenable, or we have to yank the reuse pipeline out of there. Or do we really keep that reuse pipeline if we can only discharge down there? What exactly, I think what Waterkeeper would say is, let's say there's 100,000 gallons a day going in the ground down there right now. I don't know if that's true or not. Mace might have a better number, just for conversation purposes. Okay, you can discharge 100,000 gallons a day of your new, much higher quality effluent, but no more. I think is their initial stance. I'm not sure they're going to stick to that either. I think there's maybe a negotiation there, or some, hey, look, we can improve this project. We can discharge a little bit more. But Waterkeeper's saying, show me the data that you don't hit the main stem with 0.2, 0.3 milligrams per liter TN. So Mace threw out earlier, like at some point it's a go it alone. Like, I just want to reassure you that we understand that at some point you wouldn't do it.
Yeah, then we're working on scheduling another subcommittee meeting, hopefully before our next board meeting, so we can download and discuss and see what options we have. And we're gonna go through.
Yeah, my last comment from a zoomed out standpoint is the canyon does need to pick a path and keep this in motion. And if Big Sky Water and Sewer District is not optimistic and doesn't want to deal with that unknown, I think the canyon might start to look at the go it alone just on the affordability element, and the scale of wastewater management disposal and the, I guess, direct math of how many septics were taken offline versus the quality of water going in the ground. it becomes a little more straightforward and yeah. So know that there's that element on a big picture. I'm gonna keep it on the tracks as it's a joint committee, it's a joint effort, and we'll just keep talking as a group. And then on the water quality, even broader zoom out, the waterkeeper was emphasizing assimilative capacity, like what is the river's ability to handle nutrients? And I can confidently say that the Gallatin River can handle more than the West Fork. The Gallatin River's 10x the size. The water quality is better than the West Fork. So any hurdles that the canyon's facing, you're kind of facing in the upper watershed. That said, snowmaking is an elegant solution. It matches the natural water cycle and it pulses nitrogen out. So I think snowmaking is a great solution. Just know that the Gallatin is easier to get a permit than in the West Fork, in my opinion. So.
And there is Mesa, third alternative there where, to Dick's point, let's say we don't get any discharge or we only get 100,000 gallons a day or something. But they would pay us the equivalent of what it would have cost to do that so that you can pursue a reuse project up here, still take them, but then go develop the additional 200,000 gallons a day, either in that building or with snowmaking or with all the above.
Well, it seems like the plan the elegant plan we have, bring it up, treat it, send it down, discharge, is a panacea. But it just makes so much sense. But once you start to break it apart with the costs, the hurdles that you're up against, both from DEQ, Waterkeeper, and people in the canyon, at some point you have to drop back from that perfect and look at the option Mace just said. Maybe a local system isn't the panacea that we've been looking at, but it may be the realistic, more rational way to go. But I don't want to give it up yet, but
I think
sometimes you can try too hard to make something work.
one important thing to consider here is we're kind of assuming that, the Waterkeeper's scientific arguments are, fact, which we don't know.
Defensible.
Yeah, and so really until DEQ issues us a permit and this goes under scrutiny and we don't really know. And, that's why Mesa's gonna keep working at it until we really, until it plays out.
What do you think for a timeline for that, Mace?
Yes, we have all our documentation in place to send to DEQ. And we were waiting for the next board meeting to authorize that submittal. But I think it's going to be in DEQ's court for, my best guess is 6 months, and they're going to want to see MBMG's report as kind of their backing for writing the permit. So we'll get it out of our hands ASAP, and it'll be 6-ish months before we have a feel for optimism versus pessimism. So.
One model to consider is a one pipe system. And that's after evaluating all disposal options up here. And that's, you have to look at the financial model for saving the distribution, sending it back down the pipeline, everything that goes with it. Like one pipeline, get it up here, no disposal in the canyon. I mean, at least have to consider.
Probably, then we have to look at what our current agreements state, for whether it's, what's going uphill, the, Spanish Beach, Sun Club, whatever, and those disposal mechanisms are in place today, which is the one permit for snowmaking, hopefully done, successful, another one, and then golf irrigation. So what are our obligations right now? And then can we, adequately dispose what we have right now before we add more? Annexations, all these things come into play.
200,000 gallons, whatever we're talking about in the big picture might seem like the best option if we hit this wall, but you just don't know until you start modeling.
Well, we've always made distribution an issue, a problem.
Distribution and disposal.
Disposal, sorry.
Yeah.
Trying to give it away. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, we were saying those guys should have been thinking about selling.
Tom Reeves was a big believer in that. He really was. Let's sell this. I would just say that the intangible of the maybe from 10,000 feet to evaluate this and say, everything we talk about, and I know it's a totally different path, but about the plan expansion. Plan expansion is gonna be a very complicated issue, especially if you pull the canyon out of it. I think emotionally for the community, I think it's a strong point that this would be helping the canyon and the community. Same thing with Firelight. I don't know where the plan expansion goes if you don't have the canyon. It's something we have to consider as a board. What happens without the canyon? Because if you don't have the canyon, you probably don't do Firelight. I mean, just thinking through it, not as fact. And it's hard. Then as Al said, then all of a sudden you have inventory that costs you a lot of money. So these are big decisions. I mean, these aren't just working our way through. It's gonna be a big decision, whatever happens in this game.
Yeah. Just as a reminder, the plant that was just built takes all of your existing commitments. You've got these annexations that would kick you in at some point to phase two. So it would just be a little slice of phase two without the canyon.
Yeah.
And that becomes awkward and expensive to deal with, and we'd have to figure out a way to throttle that, you know, it's like. The analogy is like Northwestern Energy managing the grid. If you have these commitments and you have to build your grid to deal with them, even if they're not there yet, you know. But they get to charge people a demand capacity reservation. There's not a similar situation for.
I think Bizrat would have a tough time financing a plan expansion without the canyon. But I mean, just common sense would say so. These are big docs. We gotta keep the budget tight on exploring the options, feasibility, probability.
Well, we're also limited to, it's phase two is phase two. There's no phase 2A, B, and C.
Yeah.
So now in your scenario, we go a little bit over and we need phase two to be operable, but now it's a lot more capacity without potentially the customers to fill that capacity in the near future.
We could do it, but right now it's like two of those most common Lego bricks, right, side by side, and we'd be slicing one of those bricks in half and trying
That
to do
starts
something.
getting that. That's the cost effective.
Yeah, and I shouldn't leave the housing trust out of it as well. I mean, we're covered right now on everything we have over coal smoke, but future, that'd be a tough one. So maybe the Bizrat would be on board. It's unfortunate that it has to be phase two, all in or no.
So all this data comes in, I mean, he's gonna help us with the financial modeling and then disqualifying anybody in this room today, but those models are gonna look pretty interesting. And should we start thinking about hiring someone
Consultants.
to help us put that together?
Well, there is a model for the canyon, and we're just refining it. So it's contracted, paid for, it's Ryan. If you talk about one for the reuse prioritization, we could certainly add 10,000 or whatever for Ryan and Nexus to say, okay, here's how those look from a CIP and rate structure capacity. Versus me just saying, well, that's $8 million and it's $200,000 a year to operate.
There's a lot of moving parts. I guess I've never seen anything rolled up where it's all collected in one area, and we should think about that. You know, so we can talk intelligently, geographically about where these can go and how they get funded and what it looks like. The model can be pretty extensive, and right now I think we look at it, you know, very independently, not collectively.
Yeah.
And that seems to me it's a problem.
Yeah. So
I'm looking at a flow, you know, I keep thinking visually a flow chart.
Right.
That we have the branches off the flow chart and we identify each one of these. Bizrat's a component of, if you go down this path, where's Bizrat in it? And then they get eliminated. So the burden goes on here. If you go down this side, you lose housing trust as well. And I should have brought that up. That's going to be an emotional thing in the community. I think the canyon's an emotional. We need a flow chart that says, if we get on this path, we may lose this, or we would lose this. Or we gain this, but I like the word, I kept saying feasibility, probability is a big issue, so.
What you alluded to earlier was dollars per gallon of disposal or reuse or whatever you want to call it. And what you're maybe getting at is, okay, let's take it from that dollars per gallon to dollars per connected user, you know, whether it's a quarterly or,
For big charges and everything else, just kind of play into that, all the wraps together.
yeah.
Comes into obligations too. That's the hard one.
We have all this, ability to dispose or, unlimited snowmaking. You don't know the answer to that either. So there has to be collected effort, in my view.
Yeah, one thing about the disposal, I mean, topography is a factor. You know, we all know that you can't have too much of a runoff factor in there and things like that. So you start looking at it from a slope analysis in the community and you might be surprised how little you have compared to some of these permits. Everybody's all gung ho until you start getting into the engineering. So
Yeah.
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
I told you that MSU's got a snowpack, snow melt hydrologist now, just hired recently that you might want to pull into some of this and say where, if we put snowpack here, when does it melt? What are the impacts on, the streams? How far away is it? 60 days from the stream? Is it going through soils that are going to absorb it? All that sort of stuff that might be in your future.
And like I said, I'll circulate that info that you sent out yesterday. That'd be great for prep for the next meeting. I kind of red flagged that. Kind of scrambled to get this together and it ties a few of these things together as well. But yeah, it's a big download between you and Mace. Mace, anything positive to finish on?
I think I've thrown enough positive out there.
All
I'll
right.
bring more next meeting.
All right. We'll get a calendar out too before we leave on this.
Yep. And I think Mace has been positive
Yeah,
about
that's what I mean.
the chances down there still. It would just, it's gonna take a big effort and if conservation groups litigate, then it's gonna slow it down and create uncertainty. What we want is more probability.
Yeah, I reiterate what Peter mentioned, that Guy only knows what he knows, and he actually hasn't dove into really much on this hydrogeology and these dynamics, and DEQ and MBMG will have an opinion on this, and yeah, so we shouldn't be all pessimistic based on the waterkeeper alone, so.
They're not a science group, they're an advocacy group. They know a lot of science, but hesitate to say that Mace and Scott are a pretty strong team in that respect as well.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you all.
Okay, on a more positive note, Al. You're making a lot of headway on the annex or the Northwest Energy.
We continue to get close. We've reviewed preliminary title commitments. We've seen some draft deeds. Dick mentioned this morning, you saw that the boundary realignment is on the county agenda. So that is moving forward. I guess it might be a little unfair, but Susan, were you comfortable with the response to their indemnification agreement? And did that satisfy your one concern on the deed?
I didn't have a chance to look at it, Al. Sorry, I was out for the last part of last week at a class. So
Okay.
It's on my list. I'm sure we're close. I'm a little more concerned about, does anybody have a full copy of the packet for the realignment? Because it should have gone in with deeds. Were those deeds signed or unsigned?
They would be unsigned because we didn't sign them.
I didn't sign them.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
The-
Well, except that it wouldn't really be us, would it? Wouldn't it be between Northwest Energy and
Yeah,
BSOA? So we wouldn't need to sign them.
yeah, I think we just got to view and make comment, but nothing was presented for us to sign.
Well, it's
I'll pull the application later today and I can look at that today, but I mean, I appreciate that they took off my one concern. I'm not sure how I feel about the indemnity of us taking it and them agreeing that they'll indemnify us if anybody ever comes back, which it's a title issue that's probably too obscure and frankly, nobody's chasing it down to actually get it released, but I'll look at that this afternoon now.
Yeah, I think they're suggesting that they do those periodically, that for every transaction, they can't take the effort, so periodically they do
In bundles.
in bundles.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in their agreement.
I saw that, but what I've never seen is the underlying, I mean, what's the obligation that's tied up? What other obligations are tied up with this one? So
Okay. That's
I
what
can
I'm about.
chase that with the title company too. Not a problem.
Susan, I assure you, I won't sign anything and I'll bet Johnny doesn't sign anything on this until we hear from him.
Okay, but we want to get it done too, so no problem.
No.
So the summary though is that we are close. We're just working on some details.
Seems more important than ever to have a site like that with everything we're talking about. And forget water. Okay. Development subdivision, nothing on the agenda. Get right into legal, Spanish Peaks annexation. Where are we at with that? Susan or Johnny? Attorneys talking?
Susan just mentioned she was out last week with the class, so we haven't, John did send the amended and we have all that stuff, so I just need to hook up with Susan and
So
make sure we're good.
we had a subcommittee meeting in January, right? Had some red line, went back and forth. Right now, it's with the attorneys. Do we need to schedule another subcommittee meeting today, or do we wait for the attorneys?
Let's wait for the attorneys,
Okay.
because everything that was presented was along the lines of what we discussed in our subcommittee.
It's up to you. The last agreement we got back from.
Yeah. So there's nothing we need to do between now and the next meeting. Okay? Thank you, Susan, again, staying on that. Coal smoke,
Same.
same.
Yep.
Have you met on anything in between, anything for the board?
No,
We haven't met in a couple months. I'm sure you have a full plate you're working with over there. You got a lot going.
I think we're just waiting for the agreement because we tried to schedule a meeting right after the last board meeting, but we wanted it to be productive and have an agreement to talk about, maybe review and talk about ahead of that meeting, just to manage everyone's time.
So that's actually with Susan and Gina, correct?
Correct.
Great.
so Susan and Gina, and I got a notification from Tammy with BizRad that at the next board meeting, she wants to come in and present the language that is going on the ballot. So I think we'll have the final pieces for that. I haven't seen it yet, but I do have the request from Tammy to come in and present that next month.
Anything we need to do between now and our next meeting? No, we do, call the meeting. If all of a sudden someone jumps on it, let's just don't want to stall on a couple of these.
Yeah, if there's any way to try and get back just comments from the December red line and then give us a little time to review and then set up a meeting ahead of next board meeting, that would be incredible. But understand you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I mean, both attorneys are talking in the meantime. That's what I wanted to make sure that. A couple of those items I think were pretty easy to resolve, but there were a couple that were a little more difficult. Okay. Susan. All right, for
Can
annexation.
we step back just for a second, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is something that we need to accomplish before the vote happens, correct?
Correct. First reading.
First reading, so that.
Well, that's what they would like. We don't actually have to do that because what we're doing has nothing to do with the ballot language that is going out to the public for vote.
I was under the impression that there was a deadline on it.
No.
I think it was just more time. It made sense to get that. Our first reading done and then 2 months later, 3 months later was the election and
Then we're ready to basically pull the trigger,
Yeah.
the next reading. So we wouldn't have to take an extra month at that point, once it's approved.
We need to approve
Is
the
that right?
annexation for it to go on the ballot, correct?
I think it really gives the resort tax confidence to keep it on the ballot, right? That there has been a first reading and then the second and if the third would be thereafter. And
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna let Susan weigh in because I disagree with that because we're already committed.
Well, we're not gonna vote on it today, okay?
So-
And I think there was.
Mr. Chairman, I hate, again, I look at the back of your head, so I really feel terrible about interrupting you from behind your head.
Thank you.
But what we had talked about and what we had agreed to is we would do a first reading before the vote because it's going to use the SFEs that are already allocated from the Housing Trust. So we don't have that hurdle to overcome. But we agreed that we wouldn't do the second reading until after the vote passed because then there would be funding to pay for it. So it was kind of a tiered process in order to be able to absolutely convey to the community that, yes, this will have water and sewer service. And then I think there's a caveat to the water, but Johnny would have to explain that a little more, but it has sewer service, sewer capacity. And so if the community then voted for the funds that would then pay for the project, then we would go forward and annex it.
Is that how you understood it, guys? Okay.
I think the way Susan just characterized it really hits it on the head and that it's not requirement in any of that, but it's giving the voters confidence or
really removing any lack of
Right.
confidence from the voters that there's any chance that they might vote for something that, through another mechanism won't happen.
I think there was a little confusion because when Danny was here before, he said, look, we'd like to have this in December so that our board's cleared to move forward with this. They needed, quote, the confidence. I think we supplied that confidence. And now the next step is to get that first reading for the voter confidence. And then we table it until the vote is done. Is that correct?
I think that makes sense.
Okay, great.
I think, and that's, I think, what I was asking. So from a practical
First reading.
standpoint, that's either March or April.
Agreed.
Right. So I'm just making sure we know what our kind of timeline is.
Which is the next meeting or the meeting after.
Yeah.
Let's,
Comes up quick.
I mean, for the first reading, we need to resolve some of the redlining. So I would probably go on record saying, let's see if we can prioritize this so that we can get that reading in case it's the pothole in March that we need to resolve in April. We don't want to be having special meetings. So let's see if we can get that as an action item in March. If Susan, you can work that out, maybe bump that on the priority list, not to keep bumping Spanish Peaks out on, but that one might need be a little more time sensitive.
I'll do my best. I gotta get with Donovan because we just got infrastructure for uplands and cold smoke. So it's in modeling right now. So till I get that back, which would satisfy some of the red lines that are in the agreements.
Well, it's good to understand this is now a priority that we didn't see coming maybe a month ago. So get it coming up March. Why don't you talk about March today?
No.
All right, good call. Anything else in those topics? I'd go, I'd also say if we need a subcommittee meeting on either of those, people can get their calendars out today, just to see if we need to nudge something along on any of these topics. You know, what happened with CIP, we'll know we're dealing with that. We know we're gonna be having the Joint Canyon meetings. See, before we leave here today, that everybody can work it in their schedule. Okay. All right, floor annexation petitions under review.
The same that we presented last month, you just accept it to process.
Process, but I like Dave, it's great.
I'm not making any motions. I just-
We meet with Boyne later this week, so we'll have a better idea of what that intent is, because we asked the same questions, like I'm not gonna run a main all the way up to the top of Lone Peaks. We just want to discuss with them because we also got a lot of, improvements to do with Mountain Village and all that stuff up there. So we've had a lot of conversations with them, but now, we're starting to formalize those. So then the other one is the fire department, which I'm waiting for engineering report on their design. Because we got approved capacity and stuff for that down there, and what that's gonna look like. And then we have independent, which I need to write up and it's not favorable for where that location is on the way up at the top of our Mountain Village system, so.
Well, let's maybe initiate this process of quote processing and you recommending. I think that they're out there somewhere. I don't know where they are, but I remember decades, in the last few decades, when a project finished up and it didn't use all its SFEs, we were tracking them at some point in time, and they were used for things like a BSCO. Boyne actually donated chapel ones in the bathroom down here, but we said, let's keep this pool together of SFEs for capacity for things just like the fire station. So maybe it'd be time to track those and see if there are other entities coming in behind them, schools or whatever it is, and see how many of those came out. I know in Ron's great big spreadsheet about that big, he had surplus. I can give you a couple of properties that had a surplus.
Yeah, okay.
That fell by the wayside.
Yep.
So it'd be good to tag those, so we initiate that process. Okay. All right, but let's see, new development subdivisions, how about just general? What's going on? What's going on down here? Where are we at with permit applications, activity? Any hotels going in or anything?
No.
I feel like I'm out of the blue.
One permit.
One
One?
permit, yeah, a mixed use in West Fork on Snowy Mountain Circle. That was it. I don't think of anything else that's, one.
Too much snow.
I asked her 3 times, like, just one permit?
And
That's
a
it.
childcare facility also going into West Fork, the laundromat's getting converted to a childcare facility, so that's a reduction in SFEs. That's coming, hasn't been
A
processed.
reduction necessary.
Yeah.
Um,
One number.
You and I had talked a little bit about maybe if the board's up for it, is a retreat.
Mhm.
What's the board think of having a retreat? First question, what do you think about a retreat? We had a successful run there. I can't think of the guy's name. Was it like a Skip or something or a Chip? I don't know the guy. We had a retreat years ago. I remember Les Lowell brought him to the table.
So they changed the word retreat to strategic
Yeah.
planning work session.
Was it?
I'm gonna remind you, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Les schooled me a little bit in that one. It was good. But
From my discussion with Lori Adams, she was very positive and with everything that we've done in, updating the district. Now is the time to do it. And again, it all ties into what we're trying to do and the directives and goals. Kind of puts the icing on the cake and kind of, just completes the bigger vision. So looking to have that hopefully completed for the administrative executive team before July. So to host a full day session or a couple half-day sessions, but, have one and then process all that and then come back and recap. And then after that's done, having like 2 half-day sessions with the staff, we put out surveys and stuff, and then she would sit down with the superintendents and all that stuff, so.
Well, what's the board think? We've all been to something in strategic planning, whatever it is, but it's an opportunity where you don't have an agenda per se that need action items for the community, but they're to sit down and say, hey, what do you think about taking care of the ratepayers as they are, or should we pursue expansion if it's stretching? All the different philosophical things we've talked about through the years. Annexation used to be a dirty word. Reallocation of SFEs used to be a dirty word. I voted down on that one pretty easily, but there are a lot of things out there. We were talking about how has it worked out with the workforce housing SFE table now? Is it time to do an audit to see if that was either adequate or overkill or whatever? It was a lot of the things that we just talked about conceptually in the community, how to fine tune what we're doing, not stuck in a board meeting. It's something everybody's good about and we're all in the same direction. Maybe it's not necessary, but they can be productive. They have to be publicly noticed because you do have a forum. And a couple of people participate. I cannot think of his name. He was from Maine. He was Les's guy, but he was.
That's right.
Come on, you guys, take help here. Throw the dog a bone. No, it's like a Skip or a Chip or a. The guy from Maine. All right, I don't know. I've seen him around here.
Can we get him back?
Can we get the guy from Maine?
Although last year, you actually did it for, I think, BSOC or
Yes,
like the Resorts District or something.
Yeah,
He did it.
we're gonna find this guy. Conceptually, am I going down? It's everything that we talk about. Even in the last day, we're dealing with Scott's grade, we're going back and forth with Susan yesterday, and I go, I don't want to hijack these topics. I want to get everybody on the same page where they can sit in a meeting and say, you know what, I like this direction or I don't like this direction, or why are we doing this?
I agree. We should develop an agenda and work on meetings together off campus or somewhere about here, really care where, but just talk through it. We've got a lot of, big decisions coming up and like.
Facilitator is the key too. You got to get a good facilitator. In time slots, we all put in what we'd like to cover and how we'd like to cover it. You put time slots in it. You're pretty militant about the time slots. You're over your one. And then if you need to revisit it again, if you need more time, you come back later, but
You have to ask permission.
thanks.
Exactly. Pretty well.
Got it. Can we take 10 minutes of your time slot? Yeah, okay.
Sure.
I think with the amount of transition we've had, both personnel or will be having, and transition in both personnel and philosophy or potential philosophy, I think now is the time to sit down and really evaluate all of that.
Great, and I think this canyon's a great example. Yeah. There's a lot of things, and we've had great boards through the years. I mentioned Tom, Tom was fantastic chair. Packy was, he was fun to work with too. And now I look at it and say, man, are we covering it as focused as we used to? But we have so many more things to take out there that it's like every day there's something new that you're chasing. I want it to be efficient, and I'm sure everybody wants to be relevant and effective at the same time. So, and being behind on your review, take responsibility on that, and we should have done that a while ago. So, you deserve it. So.
What are you thinking of? When?
I'm thinking I need to give it to Amy, and she makes all these decisions.
Yeah,
'cause I
I'll
don't-
send out some dates because we're working with Lori. We'll just, you need to finish.
We're looking at her proposal.
Yeah.
She has a whole system set up, but yeah, we can look at dates.
Yeah,
So she would
Gave her time.
I think so, yeah.
She sent out surveys so that we give you the opportunity to provide your input and what you would like to see, or, time to discuss. And then that will tell us whether or not it's a full day or a couple of days or break it up or whatever, so.
Man, that was in Rumsey, yeah.
Yeah, no.
No, no. I'm coming up with this guy's name.
Mr. May.
The sooner we end the meeting, the sooner you'll come to the answer.
As soon as I walk out the door, I'm going through ABC. Yeah. Okay, last one. Let's talk, or for mine, anybody, now's the time, I don't have to race out, but talking about Terry, your schedule and what's going on. As a board, we got to start thinking about your replacement. I didn't wrap it up. We're talking about different people. I think, I've talked to Amy about some thoughts and Johnny as well. And boy, networking in the community can come in really handy sometimes. Someone who's here, proven, housing, everything down the line. If the board's thinks it's a good idea, maybe we just start networking locally before we expand. At least just talk to some people that maybe, there's a lot of really good candidates that are in the Big Sky.
5 that I know of already.
5?
That have inquired about his potential retirement.
Really? Okay, glad I brought it up.
Yeah, very they dedicated skiers like Terry.
Okay. Not to say, we still want the best candidate, but boy, you'd hate to ever have, I had no idea you had 5, but 5 candidates here locally that are community members, and we said, wow, wonder why we're interviewing people from Alabama. So, again, we're gonna miss you, but it's time.
From our discussions, if it's okay if I jump in before you do, we initially had planned on opening the position in January. You had asked me to wait. So it's all ready to go. We were gonna pull that trigger in June to advertise for 30 days. I would like Al, at least Al, to be on the review committee.
That was good for me.
Yep, with me and Amy, just because we are looking for, a certain skill set that's gonna help set us up. We'll gather the evaluations. I've got a pretty stringent timeline that we review and hopefully interview in July. Get them on board by August so they can start transition with Terry, who is out at the end of the year.
Great.
That sounds like a good plan to me. I'm working towards coming up with a plan for my retirement, and as you said, Brian, it never goes as you plan.
Yeah.
So.
It won't either. Well, good. Hey, thanks for staying on it. Still February. Al, you okay?
Yeah.
Great. Hey, hands down.
Have your feedback on it too.
Yeah, no, I figured it'd be me, you, Terry and Amy. And then we can make a recommendation, and have that selection. So.
You okay going locally to start? That's just a question. I mean, it was just.
Yeah, we were gonna advertise with Jack and then down at MSU, but from the inquiries we've gotten since Terry has talked about it, we've had several local inquiries.
I was thinking more like Beehive Brewery networking. You're over there, hey, isn't that person an accountant over there? Let's.
Feel free to put it out. The more the merrier. I would love to have that problem without
Strategy.
so through.
I love this place. Great, thank you.
We have to advertise.
Yes. To follow suit with the criteria that's in the policy and procedure plan.
Okay.
I'm just curious, I didn't know how far reaching we had to.
We put it out, it through Bozeman Chronicle, it's advertised on our website, and then, reach out to vote our MSU, local
It's a good question. I wasn't leaning that way.
I don't feel we need to go to national cert. I mean, if I was worried that we weren't gonna find somebody local, then yeah, maybe that'd be a different story, but I think we'll have plenty of interest.
Much larger community than 20 years or 24 years ago, so.
Oh, man,
A lot more people here. Hmm?
That's been 24 years.
Yeah, it'll be 24 years in July.
Thank you.
Good job, Terry.
Congrats. Anything else? Board? A lot of balls in the air, I'll tell you that one right now. So, maybe we can, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn and we'll just get out calendars, see what's good for everybody between.
March 18th. Next meeting.
Yep. Yeah. Day after St. Patty's Day. All right.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor? All right, thank you.